The raven's wings beat like muffled thunder across the morning sky, its black shape cutting between rose-gold shafts of dawn over Storm's End. Robert Baratheon stood upon the eastern parapet, salt spray combing through his beard, eyes fixed on the horizon where the sea shimmered like hammered brass. The rebellion lay 9 moons behind him, yet its echo lived in every tendon, in every ache of his sword arm. Once he would have greeted the sunrise with a roar of victory, a goblet raised in boastful triumph. Now the daylight felt strangely hollow, a bright hush that asked questions he was ill-prepared to answer. The raven alighted upon the merlon beside him and cocked its head, delivering its parchment with a short, imperious croak. Robert broke the seal of red wax, scored by a 3-headed dragon. Even before he unrolled the letter, he tasted iron on his tongue, as though the very notion of reading the script of House Targaryen pressed a fresh wound against his heart. It was Rhaella's hand, formal yet unafraid, written from the exile of Dragonstone. The words spoke of winter's approach, of a people battered and starving, of loyal houses dwindling like candles in a draught. They spoke, too, of a mother's plea for her children. Prince Viserys, still a babe clutching at illusions of grandeur, and infant Daenerys, swaddled in silk yet lacking fire's warm promise. Robert read and reread, feeling each line carve new channels across the stony map of his resolve. Across Westeros, songs already painted him the savior who had shattered a tyrant's crown. Bards strummed his victories night by night in smoky halls, yet those same halls now hummed with merchants, worry, vassals' impatience, and the quiet questions of lords who had once worn the dragon proudly on their clip. Robert's throne, freshly hammered from enemy steel, was a seat of embers rather than ease. He closed his eyes, breathing brine and wind. Rhaella's final sentence glowed behind his lids. Peace may yet be forged in the furnace of mercy. He felt, against every instinct, against every hard-won scar, how the phrase softened the armor around his heart. When morning turned to full sun, the king rode from the fortress, bannered by stag and crowned black antlers. Ser Barristan Selmy rode at his flank, his cloak white as a gull's wing, expression carved from notions of honor, too rigid for ordinary men. Behind them thundered the storm god, spears flashing like a stand of pale reeds. Across rolling meadows, they went until the shadow of Storm's End dwindled, and only the cries of distant gulls lingered. At the first stream crossing, Robert dismounted and washed his face. Foam swirled around his knuckles, carrying away salt and doubt alike. He looked to Barristan. "Tell me truly, old friend, what becomes of a kingdom built on vengeance alone?" Selmy, never one to flinch, met his gaze. "It becomes a graveyard polished by rain, your grace." Robert laughed, but the sound lacked mirth. He cupped water and drank. In old tales, the stag devoured the dragon. In the hush of that brook, Robert felt how close he had come to devouring himself. By dusk they reached the stone manor of House Estermont, kin to Robert through his mother. There the king gathered a smaller council than the one that squabbled in King's Landing. Stannis, stern as winter bark. Renly, bright as summer grass. Lord Jon Arryn, whose eyes still weighed the scales between justice and survival. And Eddard Stark, summoned south once more from the mists of the neck. Candles crowded the table, their flames bending like listeners. Robert laid the letter before them. "The dragon's last embers flicker on Dragonstone," he said, voice gravelo. "Rhaella calls for clemency." Stannis' jaw clenched. "Dragons grow anew, if fed, brother. Starve them, and we shall know peace for generations." Renly fingered the velvet of his sleeve. "Peace bought with famine is no peace at all." Jon Arryn touched the parchment's edge. "A realm gathered by rebellion can as easily be broken by resentment. Mercy now may sow loyalty later, We have learned how easily small folk trade one sigil for another when bread is scarce. Eddard spoke last, words slow as northern dawn. I marched beside you because the mad king burned my father and brother. Yet vengeance was never our oath. We fought to end terror. If terror persists in our victory, then we are no true victors. Nazi. The chamber breathed around them. Robert recalled the Battle of the Trident, the crash of armor, the river sluicing red around his boots, Rhaegar shattering beneath his warhammer. He had cursed the Targaryen line with every strike, yet even then, some chord in him had echoed the music that died with Rhaegar's last breath. The prince's rubies scattered like frozen tears, and still the choir of steel had faltered, as though the world itself mourned potential never born. Very well, Robert said at last. We sail within the fortnight. Gulltown's harbor was a forest of masts. Ships creaked and shifted on oily swells, gulls cawed overhead, and fishmongers shouted prices that soured on the air. Robert's royal galley, Stormbreaker, carried banners half-furled, the crowned stag sharing its pole with a banner of pale truce. White silk bisected by a thin red line, signifying blood repaid by mercy. Sailors whispered that the sea would remember such colors. As the fleet cut toward Dragonstone, squalls clawed at canvas. Lightning forked across bruised dark heavens, and thunder rolled like drums of ancient Valyria. Robert stood amidships, rain sluicing through his hair, absorbing sky rage with quiet resignation. He wondered if the storm itself sought to avenge the dragons he now sought to spare. Dragonstone emerged one dawn, slate cliffs rising from foam like the jaws of a leviathan. Black stone towers clawed upward, gargoyles fixed in perpetual snarl. No welcoming banners fluttered. Only watchfires marked the battlements, embers in a dragon's throat. The landing party climbed wet steps, boots slipping on moss. Atop the causeway waited Queen Rhaella, silver hair braided tight, violet eyes shadowed by too many losses. Beside her huddled young Viserys, eyes wary, and a nursemaid who cradled swaddled Daenerys. No horns sounded, no swords were drawn. Waves hissed below, as though eager to swallow any false move. Robert lowered his hood. The wind tugged his cloak, revealing the hammered antler brooch. He sensed Barristan and Ned a pace behind, but motioned them to stillness. "Your Grace," he said, and let the title hang like frost. He had never intended those words for a dragon, yet on his tongue they softened, becoming an offering rather than capitulation. Rhaella dipped her head, not a queenly nod, but a woman's gesture, brittle and weary. King Robert. Even Viserys, pale and shivering, held silent. Moonlight governed that first council, convened in the chamber of the painted table. The carved map of Westeros bore fresh dust, as though neglect had settled across the realm itself. Robert traced the riverlands with a calloused finger. Our kingdom's wounds will fester if left ungouged. Rhaella listened. She spoke little, but her gaze never strayed from his. And Robert recognized how rule had tempered her. She was no mad tyrant, no puppet of delusion. She was a survivor in a world that chewed survivors down to bone. They spoke of grain, of roads unpatrolled, of ports desperate for coin. They spoke of houses sundered and husbands lost in fields far from home. Helplessness, Robert learned, was a debt carried by victor and vanquished alike. When dawn feathered the windows, Rhaella cradled Daenerys at her breast, while Robert stood beside the hearth. The child cooed, unaware that her life balanced upon her mother's next words. "Will you take her as hostage?" the queen asked, voice papery but steady. "No." Robert's answer came without thought. "A hostage binds men by fear. I would have allies bound by honor." Rhaella's eyes widened, then softened. "Honor?" she repeated, as though tasting an unfamiliar spice. Visitors came coaxed by this fragile promise. Lord Connington in secret, Lord Hightower's Ravenborn envoy, even dour Stannis, who grudgingly administered fleets, yet watched the Targaryen children with a gaze like a drawn bow. Over evenings of wind-lashed rain, a plan formed, uneasy, precarious, but luminous with possibility. Robert would wed, not Lyanna, whose memory haunted Winterfell's crypts. She was a song of frost no wedding could thaw. Cersei Lannister's golden net lay waiting in the halls of King's Landing. Yet even Tywin's daughter, with her sheen of silk and ambition, suddenly felt miscast in the new page Robert contemplated turning. The realm required something steadier than pride, kinder than revenge. So the council proposed an unprecedented match. Lord Renly Baratheon, youngest brother beloved of courts, to wed Princess Daenerys when she came of age, 7 years hence. A union of stag and dragon, summer and storm, that might graft two lineages into stronger root. In the interim, Rhaella would remain Lady Protector of Dragonstone under crown oversight, free to raise her children, but bound by oaths of peace. Some balked. Stannis spoke of broken laws. Others muttered of Targaryen temper. Robert silenced them with a fist upon the painted table. "We have bled enough ink upon parchment of hate," he declared. "Let the next generation write in calmer hand." As moon seasons turned, messages fled to every corner of Westeros. Many lords cursed the notion, yet more considered the cost of renewed war, and found coin short. Small folk, ever pragmatic, traded dragon-embroidered scraps for stag-pin ribbons, speculating on colors of future feasts. Yet peace is a blade forged slowly, and each strike of the smith's hammer may reveal hidden cracks. Across the narrow sea, exiled sellswords muttered of promises unkept. Various little birds sang of Tywin Lannister brooding in Casterly Rock, displeased at the spurning of his golden daughter. In Dorne, Oberyn Martell sharpened grievances beside his spear, wondering if the new accord priced his sister Ellia's blood too cheaply. For Robert, the days on Dragonstone became a crucible. Each sunrise he walked a sea dragon, tower battlements, with visories trailing at a cautious remove. The boy flinging questions like pebbles. Ancient history, swordplay, the taste of mulled wine. Robert answered when patience allowed, finding in visories a mirror warped by hunger, pride without temperance, desire without discipline. Yet there were moments, fleeting as gulls on the wind, when the boy's laughter reminded Robert of young Renly racing down storms and corridors, sleeves too long, dreams larger than his body. One night, as storms shattered against basalt cliffs, Robert discovered Rhaella in the chamber of the dragon skulls. Monstrous visages, half-buried in shadow. She traced the smooth curvature of a brow ridge, whispering names in Valyrian older than memory. "Do you mourn them?" Robert asked. "I mourn what we lost of ourselves when they died," she replied. Her palm lingered on bone. "Dragons bound our house to wonder. Without them we became like any other, capable of cruelty but unanchored by awe." Robert felt the weight of his own house sigil, of antlers cracked in battle. "Wonder," he echoed. The realm could do with a measure of it. They spoke until lanterns guttered. In her memories of childhood flights on Dragonback, Robert sensed a wistful honesty devoid of ambition. He realized then that peace would not merely hinge upon laws and marriage contracts, but on restoring wonder to a realm grown cynical through fire and iron. "We?" In King's Landing, whispers rustled like dry leaves. Cersei Lannister paced her solar, golden hair swirling, while Jaime lounged by the window polishing steel. "An insult," she hissed, reading the raven's message. "He treats our family as second sons at a harvest feast." Jaime shrugged. "A match across bloodlines may quiet rebellion sooner than 1,000 blades." Cersei crushed the parchment. Quiet is not my desire. A queen's crown is. New. Far beneath the red keep, Varys tracked threads unseen, spooling webs that connected Tywin's ire to gullible merchants. Gullible merchants to Sellswords. Sellswords to mutinous captains along the Blackwater. The spider understood. Peace births profit slowly. War yields fortunes overnight. Yet not all skulked in shadow. On the King's Road, Eddard Stark escorted his wife Catelyn to River Run for her father's failing health. Along the route, they found inns hushed by rumor rather than song. Travelers spoke of tax relief promised by the new reign, of fields soon to be seeded beneath fresh charters. In those flickering taprooms, Ned sensed hope coiled like a shy animal, waiting to trust the light. Winter's first snow settled upon Dragonstone's highest courtyard in fragile lace. Robert held Daenerys, now toddling, as she reached out a chubby fist to capture a flake. It melted on her palm, and her violet eyes widened at the vanishing. Robert laughed, a rumble that echoed off basalt walls, and the child startled, then laughed too, a sound like chimes. Barristan Selmy approached, helm beneath arm. "Your Grace, a raven from the Eyrie." Robert balanced Daenerys on his hip and cracked the seal. Jon Arryn reported growing support among the Vale Lords. They saw trade with Dragonstone as lifeblood through winter. Yet the raven bore another note. Queen Rhaella's health faltered, cough seated deep, a lingering poison of years in a king's court aflame. Robert found her in bed, breath wheezing like torn silk. Masters bustled, poultices steeped, but the queen's gaze sought only him. "Promise me," she whispered, voice reed thin. "Promise you will protect them." He took her hand, feeling bones brittle beneath parchment skin. "On my honor as king and as man, I swear." She smiled then, an expression that stripped years from her face, and with that smile she drifted upon some unseen tide, leaving Robert to the hush of the chamber. He stood long after the maesters covered her with a sheet, the weight of his vow anchoring him to the stone floor. Well, the funeral pyre rose atop Dragonmon's windswept plateau, logs stacked like ramparts, fragrant with resin. At dusk, Robert carried a burning brand. Viserys, cloaked in black-scaled velvet, watched with eyes hollow and bright. As flame licked his mother's bier, the lad's shoulders trembled. Anger or grief? Robert could not know. But within that tremble, he sensed the fragility of their accord. When fire roared high, embers spiraled into the night, sparks winking into a sky thick with unfallen snow. Some swore later they saw shapes in the flames, wings, coils, streaming tails, as though dragons danced one last time above their queen. Robert knelt, one fist to earth, not in prayer. He had no patience for the 7 ceremonies, but in recognition that he knelt upon history's fulcrum, and that imbalance here might topple all ahead. From the heat, a single ember floated to rest upon his gloved hand. He closed his fingers around it, feeling its sting, and understood. Peace would sear as deeply as war. Moon after moon, negotiations spread outward from Dragonstone like ripples. Refugees returned to empty villages, rebuilt under joint banners. Grain ships flew both stag and dragon, signaling safe passage through waters once ruled by blockade. In King's Landing, masons labored to repair the Sept of Remembrance collapsed during the sack. Gold cloaks, once little more than brutes, now patrolled under new charter. Protect small folk. First, nobles second. Yet the realm's undercurrent twitched. Tyrell envoys hinted at withheld harvests if Highgarden's voice faded from council. The phrase demanded bridge tolls, doubled to fund their burgeoning brood. In every corner, opportunists measured the new order's strength. Robert returned to the capital at last, greeted by cheers that skimmed across cobblestones like thrown petals. He saw in the faces of bakers, smiths, fishwives a cautious brightness, a candle sheltered by cupped hands. As he ascended the Iron Throne for only the second time since his coronation, he felt its barbs anew, cruel metal forged by Aegon and sharpened by each subsequent tyrant. He wondered if any soul, dragon or stag, could truly rule upon blades without shedding part of themselves. In the throne room's echo, a herald proclaimed edicts, tax leniencies for war widows, festival decrees celebrating dawnfall, the symbolic end of conflict, trade pacts granting Dragonstone equal harbor dues. Amid clapping, Robert caught Renly's exuberant grin and Stannis' stony nod. Across the hall, Cersei Lannister stood beside her father, eyes narrowed, lips curved in an inscrutable smile. After court, Tywin requested audience. In the antechamber, candles flickered against his lion-embossed breastplate. "My daughter was promised a crown," he began without greeting. Robert poured 2 cups of Arbor Red. "Promised perhaps by your own designs, not by mine." Tywin accepted the cup, but did not drink. "The realm will not forgive you if this peace collapses, your grace. And collapses it will if all great houses are not appeased." "Nay." "Easement," Robert said, swirling wine. "Smells like rent cloth soaked in fear. I prefer alliances stitched in open daylight." He set the cup down untouched. "Cersei shall have lands, honors, and a match equal to her ambition. But she shall not have the throne through my loins." Their stares clashed like flint. At last Tywin inclined his head a fraction. "Very well. Remember that the lion watches." He exited, cloak sweeping marble like a severed shadow. Robert exhaled, shoulders loosening. The wine, still untouched, trembled in its goblet. He poured it onto the rushes, crimson soaking straw like spilled promise. "Wan Bailis." Autumn gilded the Kingswood when Robert took Daenerys for rides, astride a gentle gray palfrey. The girl, now 4, squealed at each burst of wind through her silver hair. Knights paused to bow, small folk paused to gape, unsure whether to fear or cheer. Robert tipped them casual waves. One outing, they found a wounded stag tangled in thorns, antlers broken, flank gouged by wolves. Daenerys slid from saddle and approached, despite Robert's caution. She knelt in mud, small hands stroking the beast's shivering neck. Whispering Valyrian lullabies, she calmed it until its heaving ceased. Whether it died at peace or drifted into sleep, none could tell. But Robert witnessed a tenderness that stunned him. Later, as they camped by a brook, Daenerys asked, "Why must the strong always kill the weak?" Robert stared into coals. "Not always," he said. "Sometimes. The strong protect. Then I shall be strong," she decided, gazing at stars. In that declaration he heard the faint beat of distant wings, a prophecy that tasted of blood and hope entwined. Why, 5 years slid by upon quiet wheels, leaving ruts of intrigue across polished corridors. Viserys grew into a slender youth, skilled at harp yet quick to bruise in his pride. He resented the ease with which Daenerys charmed council and cook alike. He resented the way Robert clasped the girl on his knee during feasts, recounting tales of boar hunts while Viserys sat at the fringes beside maesters, plotting his education. Storm's End hosted a grand tourney to honor the peace of 2 sigils. Knights from every corner arrived, banners snapping under coastal gales. Among competitors rode young Jorah Mormont of Bear Island, lean and eager to earn ransom for his family's debts. Sir Jaime Lannister, golden and deadly, and Oberyn Martell, whose spear twirled with serpent grace. The tilt of colors dazzled the crowd, yet beneath pennants drifted rumors of sell sales massing in the stepstones. Ships bearing black sails and a new banner, a crowned skull clutching dragonbone scepters, a selzored king rising from the ashes of defeat. Robert convened war council under torchlight, scent of salt and sweat thick. Intelligence named the would-be usurper. Maelys Blackfire's bastard grandson, styling himself Caldra Stormfire. He promised restitution to exiled knights, vengeance on the stag, restoration of dragons to rightful seat. Robert slammed fist to oak. Peace cannot flower while old grudges sow weeds. He resolved to sail at once, yet voices urged caution. Grain stores thin, winter edging farther south, and no certainty of stepstones threat beyond rumor. In the lull of argument, Daenerys stepped forward, still shy of 10 but carrying within her a solemn fire. "I will go," she said. "Send me to treat with them." The hall stilled. Robert felt his heartbeat thunder like hooves. "You are a child." "A dragon," she countered softly. "Let me show them what mercy looks like." Viserys laughed, a brittle, slicing sound. But none echoed him. Jon Arryn studied the girl, brow furrowed. Barristan's face shifted between awe and alarm. Robert knelt before Daenerys. "Mercy is a blade with two edges. Are you prepared for its weight?" "Maisie, don't you?" She laid small fingers upon his knuckles. "Teach me." And so the Forge of Peace took fresh iron, a child princess, a former usurper king, an alliance tested by distance and doubt. Plans unfurled within corridors scented by lemon cakes and parchment dust, while beyond stone walls thrummed a greater world of tempests. Across the narrow sea, Caldra Stormfire's lieutenants sharpened cutlasses. They told tales of dragons reigned by bastards, of crowns melted into chains. The sellsword king surveyed his ragged army, 1,000 blades scoured from free cities' gutters. He imagined landing at Driftmark, line breakers flanking, banners unfurling like night's own wings. He imagined small folk kneeling, hungry for legends to become flesh. On winds scented with brine, a single ship approached under pale flag. A girl with silver hair stood at prow, eyes unblinking despite spray. Caldra watched from Cliff Eyrie, curiosity gnawing. When she disembarked, no guard flanked her save an aging knight in white cloak. Barristan, the bold, himself. They walked a crooked path, lined by mercenaries' sneers. Daenerys entered Caldra's pavilion where maps sprawled like wounded beasts. She bowed, unfussed by his scoff. "I am Daenerys of House Targaryen," she said, "daughter of Rhaella, sworn ward of King Robert, bearer of peace between stag and dragon." Caldra leaned back, grin a crescent wound. "You claim titles that bore nations to tears. I bring an offer to set fires in their hearts instead." She spoke then of lands granted in the Reach for veterans willing to swear fealty, of coin paid from crown coffers to bury grudges, of pardons sealed in dragon-stamped wax. She spoke of harvest feasts where sellsword children might sit beside fisherfolk without fear of lash or levy. Her words were soft yet clear, weaving possibility like loomcraft. Caldra's laughter died by inches. He asked her who taught such politics. She answered, Robert Baratheon, Eddard Stark, even Stannis with his hard truths. She spoke of Viserys, of her hope to mend the bitterness between them. In her telling, mercy wore no mask. It was a living creature, restless and brave. Outside, Barristan watched storm clouds gather. Inside, a bastard king weighed rebellion against a child's vision. The night stretched, torches hissed, and somewhere on the waves, a lonely gull cried, "Win, sa." When Daenerys returned to Dragonstone weeks later, salt drying in her braids, she delivered Stormfire's reply. He would disband if granted a place in the royal fleet and marriage into minor nobility. No throne, no crown, only a cern. No crown, only a cern. Robert listened, arms crossed. Pride warred with pragmatism until, at last, he nodded. Let the world see how blades may be beaten into oars. Thus a new banner joined the masthead of crown galleys. A skull crowned not in gold, but in laurel. Symbol of victory surrendered for greater cause. Some mocked, others marveled. And peace, fragile, flickering but stubborn, continued its slow route across blood-damp soil. One, two, wait, torn. Winter finally arrived in earnest, sweeping from the wall like a vast sigh. Snow-blanketed King's Landing in paleness, seldom seen, muffling market cries. Children ran beside River Gate, pelting each other with clumps until bells told them home. In the Red Keep, fires roared and courtiers huddled in furs. Robert, thick with cloak and contentment, shared mulled wine with Ned, their laughter sending ravens scattering from draughts. Strange, Ned mused, gazing at frost-webbed panes. To see peace as a castle we must garrison daily. Robert grinned. A castle worth every watt. He raised his cup to the watchman. Ned touched cup to his. Flames crackled. Somewhere distant, Daenerys practiced her letters. Viserys composed a ballad for the harvest festival. Renly schemed banners for their eventual union. Somewhere beyond walls, Tywin Lannister measured patience. Oberyn Martell sharpened yet another spear. The free cities traded whispers of a realm that healed itself while they blinked. The Iron Throne still pricked Robert's back each time he sat, reminding him that rule was never gentle. But he had learned to bear those barbs as a penance and a promise. For every scar on his flesh he would plant a seed of kindness in the realm. For every ghost behind his eyelids he would raise a toast to hope. Outside, snowflakes drifted, each fragile and fleeting, yet together they formed a hush that blanketed the world. Peace, Robert reflected, was no different, delicate alone, formidable in company. And so he drank to many flakes gathered, to many voices united, to many pains transformed, not forgotten, but forged anew. In the stillness between heartbeats, he heard distant laughter, the innocent trust of a girl destined for both dragonfire and spring blossoms. He heard a boy's harp string, vibrating with yearning. He heard the murmur of ships at harbor, masts swaying like reeds in winter wind. He heard, above all, the quiet breath of a kingdom daring to dream beyond the edges of its wounds. Robert Baratheon closed his eyes and listened, believing for the first time that the song might last. In the hush following that fragile winter's peace, the capital's stone arteries, alleys, aqueducts, vaulted causeways, thawed one drip at a time, and with each droplet came renewal. Markets reopened beneath awnings patched from broken banners, potters fired kilns again, and street musicians tuned lutes that had lain silent through the siege of hunger and ruin. Robert Baratheon, stout with meat once more, and testing the limits of his own patience, guided these beginnings like a smith guiding molten iron along an unseen mole. He walked incognito at dawn, hood shadowing his black-haired bulk, sampling poor men's stew, listening to fishwives bargain over herring, hearing what courtiers never conveyed. Where a cobbler's son limped for lack of coin to buy a crutch, Robert left a silver stag and a silent nod to the startled mother. Where a sept burned by arsonists lay half rebuilt, he ordered royal masons dispatched before midday bells. Rumor of the king's unseen wanderings grew, half myth, half proof. And in that gossip, the city learned it all again. An awe born not of dragons overhead, but of a monarch moving among them, with calloused hands and an earnest smile. It was during these wanderings that Robert first overheard the phrase, "stag and star," spoken in taverns south of Cobbler's Square. The words referred to the strange new sigil, a crowned stag entwined with a slim red comet, trailing 3 heads like serpent tails, that Daenerys had sketched in charcoal one lazy afternoon, and offered as a seal for proclamations of shared rule. Robert at first dismissed it as childish fancy, yet parchment slipped from the tower of the hand bearing that mark found surprisingly quick acceptance in outlying valleys where the dragon was hated and the crown mistrusted. That star, folk muttered, symbolized something altogether unclaimed, an omen watchful of both sunlit barley fields and nights haunted by the old songs. Soon coopers daubed it on barrels, bound for the riverlands. Bakers dusted it in sugar atop honey cakes. It spread faster than any edict, carried on mouths that savored hope more readily than law. Viserys hated it. From the newly restored Maegor's holdfast, he penned furious verses decrying the dilution of dragon heraldry. Little remained of the pallid boy smothered by grief at his mother's pyre. In his place burgeoned a sallow-cheeked youth who lounged on silken cushions, yet constantly tugged at the collar of convenant that bound him to the house of his family's usurper. His retainer, Sir Ralph Stonehand, once a sellsword captain, now purchased by crown coin, offered wine and flattery in equal measure. Yet neither could dull the ache that flared whenever Viserys glimpsed the easy camaraderie between Robert and Daenerys. If the girl's destiny was a marriage to Renly, Viserys reasoned, then where did that leave the Blood Prince, legitimate son of Aerys, last male heir of true descent? He began collecting maps. He interrogated ravens on flight times across the narrow sea. He bade Stonehand inquire discreetly after the Golden Company's solvency. Far from court, the small folk had their own dramas, more immediate than princely ambition. Storms hammered the Blackwater rush, tearing quays to driftwood and flooding warehouses still thin of grain. Queen Rhaella's old vassals on Dragonstone, left now in the care of Maester Clydas and Sir Barristan's garrison, sent urgent pleas for salt preserves and siege shipments. Robert dispatched Stannis with a fleet laden to the gunwales, instructing his brother to see no belly unfed and no fisher without rigging. Stannis obeyed, jaw clenched so tight that sailors swore they heard teeth grinding louder than the anchor chains. He hated Dragonstone's damp corridors, its sulfur stink, but he hated failure more. When he returned, holds empty but for ballast, he carried a ledger meticulous as any septon's scripture, balancing copper against claws of storm damage, showing to the half-groat how the deliveries would repay themselves in 4 years of projected tariffs. Robert clasped his brother's shoulder and roared approval before the assembled court, yet Stannis only nodded, eyes already scanning the next line of duty. Renly, meanwhile, turned the tourney field into a stage for politics disguised as mirth. Each festival he hosted outside Storm's End became a tapestry where northern wolf banners stitched beside Tyrell roses, where a house reed's green dancers circled Dornish spearmen in mock duels. Minstrels sang ballads of the Golden Peace, and coined jests about how a dragon might roast a hog for a stag's feast. When Daenerys attended, still too young for betting lines yet old enough to capture the crowd's wonder, Renly crowned her Lady Springtide, draping her in a mantle of pale green leaves sewn from silk. She rode at his side through tents garlanded with lanterns until midnight, telling stories she'd memorized from old Nan's compendium of half-true histories. Observers who once plotted swords now plotted trade routes, measuring coin where they once measured grievances. But under every revel, deep currents churned. Lord Paxter Redwine's riderless destrier returned from the King's Wood one damp morning, flank raked by 3 arrow grooves. Search parties found nothing, save signs of a single galloping horse pursued by smaller hoofprints. The missing lord had been last seen dining with Tywin Lannister, discussing tariffs on Arbor wine shipments to the capital. Ravens shrieked into dark rafters carrying rumors of outlaws styled Sons of Fury, claiming descent from men slain in the Trident and vowing to bleed lions and stags alike until the dragon rebounded. Robert convened a night council where torches hissed with damp. He commanded Eddard Stark to oversee an impartial inquest. Ned accepted, though his brow furrowed at the depth of the forest shadows he would have to wade through, shadows less of trees then of hearts twisting in resentful soil. Ned's investigation revealed a network, not of bandits but of middle-tier knights, dispossessed in the rebellion. Men whose estates lay scorched, whose heirs had been hostage to both sides at one point or another, now fallen between cracks of restitution. These knights had sought Tywin's purse, and when refused, they'd turned to vengeance for hire. Evidence traced them to cellars beneath a disused sept outside Maidenpool, where parchments revealed coded letters bearing a broken dragon circlet, a symbol outlawed since the days of the Blackfire Pretenders. Ned Stark stood in that dusty crypt, lantern raising motes like snowfall in torchlight, and understood that the peace held by Robert's goodwill required constant guardians. He wrote Robert a letter as blunt as the Stark greatsword. The realm must choose between funding reconciliation at scale or face insurgencies crowned in bitterness. Robert read the letter thrice before dawn, marching over the red tiles of his solar until servants hid behind door jambs. In that pre-sunlight gloom, he weighed grain ledgers against war pensions, looked to charts forecasting treasury yield for the next 5 harvests. Gold could be found. Crown mines in the Westerlands still pumped ore, though less reliably than Lannisters claimed. But coin alone would not mend hearts grown feral. Robert summoned Daenerys and Viserys to his private solar. The girl arrived barefoot from the rookery loft, hair smelling of parchment dust. The boy sauntered in brocade too fine for his lank frame. Robert bid them sit on opposite sides of the hearth, then tossed Ned's findings between them. "You are heirs to wounds older than either of you," he said, voice hoarse. "I can stitch flesh, but not ghosts. That work will be yours." Viserys fingered the parchment as if it might bite him. "You imply these rebels kill in our name." "In the name of vengeance," Robert corrected. "Vengeance is a mask any sigil might wear." Daenerys folded her hands. "What would you have us do?" "Travel," Robert answered. "Not as prisoners or as gilded ornaments. I charge you both to ride the King's Road this coming spring. Attend harvest fairs, visit holdfasts, share tables with those who fear your names. Hear their grief. No guard in plate will ride at your back. Only humble knights, healers, scribes to account each tale." Viserys paled. "A prince does not beg for acceptance." "A prince who will one day guide half this realm begs nothing," Robert replied. "He listens, then acts." Daenerys touched her brother's sleeve, but Viserys shook her off, storming from the chamber. Robert closed his eyes. "Teach him, if you can," he muttered. Spring unfurled like a cautious smile. Buds dotted the King's Road edges, tender green against ruts still caked in black slush. The royal progress, lacking pageantry by design, comprised merely 6 wagons, a score of Stormguard in leather jerkins. Sir Barristan resigned to rough-spun instead of white enamel, and one aged septon named Arlan, whose main strength lay in gentle anecdotes. At the head rode Daenerys on a chestnut mare. Beside her, fidgeting, Viserys sat astride a rangy grey courser. He insisted on naming Balerion. The common folk they met gawked at the rider's silver hair but found no ostentation. No harpists or jugglers preceded them, nor golden procession followed. The siblings slept on straw in holdfast kitchens, ate onion soup, and listened to petitions by hearthfire. Daenerys' parchment journal filled like a secret atlas, a weaver whose daughter lost fingers to frost, a spearman widowed at the Trident still paying tax on land he could not sow, a midwife fined by local lordlings for using heretical charms that saved breech births. She wrote. Viserys scoffed. Yet overnights his scoffing waned as he, too, discovered pride in recounting each story aloud to the next village. By summer's height, rumors of the siblings' humility spread ahead of them like meadow pollen. At Maidenpool, they found the sept renovated by funds discreetly released from the royal vault, its crypt cleared of outlaw parchments, its altar rededicated to the mother and the smith in equal measure. creation and labor fused. A crowd gathered, some wearing fragments of the outlaw's sigil in token of forgiveness sought. Viserys hesitated entering, fear of being stoned perhaps, but an old hedge knight stepped forward, laid a scarred hand on the prince's shoulder, and said only, "Let the past breathe." Such small moments, Daenerys learned, performed greater magic than any royal decree. Back in the capital, Cersei Lannister's patience frayed on the loom of years. She drank arbor gold while Tywin spun fresh tactics, disguised as trivial dinners. One evening she stood before the mirror framing her beauty in molten candlelight and imagined crowns atop her children's brows. Children she had yet to birth. Children fathered by a king who now neglected the marriage proposal that once seemed inevitable. She wrote a letter to Jaime stationed at River Run with the royal guard escort. "Brother, love and steel both dull and scabbard. Return, for I have schemes requiring more than letters." Jaime returned at dusk a month later, hair shorter from campaign dust, but eyes gleaming mischief. They conspired as only twins could, weaving whispers through labyrinthine passages of the Red Keep. Their first thread tugged at the Hanseatic Guild of Myr, which coveted Westerosi oak for galley keels. Cersei bribed the guildmaster to float rumors that the king's peace had so weakened tariffs that Associ fleets would choke crown ports within seasons. Merchants panicked. Small folk who never saw a galley still heard talk of foreign sicknesses, dusky corsairs. Robert laughed off the rumors until dockworkers marched to the Red Keep, demanding assurance their wages would not be undercut by Myrish sailors. Forced to appease them, Robert signed a temporary maritime levy. Cersei paraded the parchment in private, first blood drawn, with Jaime's smirk gleaming approval. Yet the scheme rippled wider than they intended. The levy pinched shipments of stepstones olives to Old Town, driving Hightower brokers to petition for redress. Maester Gorman Tyrell, resident scholar at the Citadel and cousin to Mace Tyrell, seized upon the unrest to propose a grand summit on trade and tithe, inviting lords from every region. The Citadel's rookery filled the sky with ravens, each carrying summons under the new stag and star wax. Unwittingly, Cersei's sabotage birthed the largest conclave of Westerosi lords since King Jaehaerys' golden wedding. When the summit convened, stalls lined old towns, honey-paved avenues, hawking whitefish stew, Dorne sweet wine, and hand-embroidered scarves showing stag antlers, cradling a star. Robert arrived by barge along the Honeywine River, greeted by Tyrell pageantry so lavish even Stannis muttered a rare compliment. Daenerys clutched Renly's elbow, awed by the towering Hightower, whose beacon fire turned night into dawn once every hour. Viserys, acting as squire to Sir Barristan, affected boredom yet secretly counted each ship docked beneath the harbor ramparts, imagining them his to command. Inside the Starry Sept, whose vaults rivaled any king's treasury in colored glass, Robert addressed the gathering. He spoke not of levies, but of mutual plenty, of a realm that invested in each region's strengths. He proposed a rotational fund, seeded by crown gold, matched by major houses, to repair roads every spring along a different regional circuit, ensuring continuous employment and the free flow of goods. He proposed a forgiveness program that would erase half of wartime tax arrears for holdfasts that met crop quotas 3 years running. He named it the R'ylla Accord, honoring the Queen, whose plea had begun his transformation. Pause thundered, but dissent soon followed. Lord Walder Frey scoffed at losing his toll monopoly, while roads improved. Prince Oberyn Martell argued that Dorne had been neutral in the rebellion, and thus owed no coin. Tywin Lannister remained silent, but his eyes flickered cold. Debate rolled on until midnight torches guttered. Yet something new occurred. No swords left scabbards. Instead, Tyrell arborists invited Frey envoys to sample peaches from experimental greenhouses. Dornish vintners offered spiced wine to Lannister pages, Maesters in gray noticed quills scribbling barter proposals where once only casualty figures had filled parchment. In corridors of marble and candle smoke, the forging of alliances replaced the forging of blades. During these proceedings, Daenerys wandered the Citadel's lesser libraries with Gorman Tyrell as guide. Under vaulted rafters smelling of vellum and dust, she discovered treatises on dragon lore, hatching rituals, rider bonds, lost Valyrian steel. She read of Vermax, sea smoke, Tessarian, and countless eggs gone petrified under neglect. Among these volumes, she found references to whinstone incubation, a hypothesis that dragonfire could be replicated in crucibles using volcanic glass and alchemical oils. She copied passages, her quill scratching like distant wings, each note fueling dreams half fearful, half exultant, dreams that wonder might yet brand her house without brandishing flame. Viserys, following her trail into the library one dusky afternoon, glimpsed the dragon sketches she tucked hurriedly away. He demanded to read them. She refused. In that hush, heavy with suspended candle smoke, brother and sister stared across hundreds of years of rivalry. "Knowledge is not a crown you alone may wear," she whispered. But Viserys spun on heel, cloak snapping, and left behind mutterings of stolen birthright. Before the summit closed, Tywin invited Robert to a private dinner atop the high tower, claiming the view inspired frank talk. There, between skies indigo as crushed lapis and sea freckled with lantern lights, they faced each other over spiced goat. Tywin proposed a marriage still, this time between Joffrey, a lion cub unborn but expected soon, and Shireen Baratheon, or perhaps Myrcella to Renly, whichever union mathematics of lineage favored. Robert counter-proposed a charter to open Lannister gold mines to crown auditors in return for an exclusive minting bureau along the Gold Road. Tywin nodded, appreciating the king's sharpened acumen, yet noting each concession became costlier. When they parted at midnight, both men understood they had taken each other's measure anew, and that the next bargain might be waged in silence rather than feast. South of all this splendor, across the Red Mountains, Doran simmered. Princess Arianne, nearing womanhood, heard her father Doran caution patience in all matters of realm. Yet Oberyn, ever the viper, returned from Old Town humming ballads praising the stag and star. He accused his brother of dormancy. Arianne, torn between caution and fire, penned letters to Daenerys proposing friendship tours across sandship villages. Raven flights multiplied. Slender threads of camaraderie stretched over deserts once thought impassable by diplomacy. The year that followed proved mild, harvests generous. Ships bearing the stag and star crest ran maize from the Reach to Dragonstone, spices from Dorne to the Vale. Septons preached reconciliation in vaulted halls. Yet that same year, reports filtered of disappearances north of the Wall. Patrols gone silent, wildling clans massing under a banner none had seen, shaped like a half-circle of ice crowned with something that might have been antlers. Lord Commander Jorah Mormont sent ravens urging southern attention. Robert read the scroll by candle flicker, a muscle ticking in his cheek. In the small council he spoke of funds to bolster the night's watch, but optics of paying black-clad crows in a time of surplus seemed wasteful to lords who had never glimpsed a giant's rib cage poking from snow. The matter was shelved until later, and Mormont's letters grew grimmer, describing shapes that moved like men yet ignored the laws of flesh. While nobles quibbled over the unseen, real trouble stirred in plain view. An epidemic of spotted fever bloomed along the Jade Coast, tracing its source to labor camps forced by Taroshi captains, fugitives from Stepstone's war, now smuggling dyes into Lannisport. When the fever slipped through sailors into Westeros, small folk blamed foreigners, breaking windows of Taroshi inns. Trade faltered. Robert summoned Grand Maester Pycelle, who recommended quarantine but also a proclamation blaming Tyrosh to preserve domestic calm. Daenerys argued for free clinics and truth. Pycelle balked. Fear, he claimed, curbs riots. Robert listened, beard bristling. He compromised. Fever wards funded by the crown, but news of Tyrosh's transgression released only after clinics opened. Cersei seized the delay to leak partial rumors that the Targaryen girl had argued for succor to Easterners over Westerosi. In taverns from Duskendale to Lannisport, tongues wagged. The dragon princess loved Taroshi perfumes more than Westerosi children. Renly raced to quell the stories, dispatching envoys attesting to Daenerys' nightly vigils in plague tents. But falsehood stuck where truth slithered. Daenerys discovered effigies of herself burned in Gull Town, their charred remains crowned with red-painted stars, defaced by crossed antlers. She wept in Maester Aemon's old quarters on Dragonstone, heart bruised that kindness be so easily deformed into suspicion. Viserys, seeing her sorrow, at first wore a smirk that quickly withered. For all his grievances, the sight of his sister broken stirred some fragment of kinship, not yet fossilized. He visited her by moonlight, offering clumsy comfort, speaking of their mother's lullaby in High Valyrian. She listened, and together they recalled memories half-shaded by time, Rhaella brushing their hair beside hearths in hidden chambers, whispering tales of Balerian's shadows sweeping over grain fields, promising them that night's darkest curve always yields to dawn. They fell asleep against the sill while storms battered the sea. Siblings reunited for one quiet vigil. The fever receded. Come spring, leaving behind orphan guilds and a newly minted lazaret charter under crown seal. Pycelle congratulated himself in council, yet Robert credited Daenerys publicly during the chime ceremony, inaugurating each ward. The applause that followed echoed long past dusk. Cersei's nails scored lines along her palms. She realized then the dragon girl's allure grew precisely because she suffered arrows of slander and still rose, an image that no amount of court culture could replicate. It was in the wake of the plague that Daenerys, now nearing her name day 14, knelt before Robert and requested command, nominal, symbolical, of one of the royal fleets being refitted at Driftmark. Not to wage war, she clarified, but to patrol, to aid fisherfolk, to learn seamanship so no coast suffers ignorance of its princess. Robert stared at her, seeing not the toddler chasing snowflakes, but a young woman whose calm carried storms beneath. He granted her the Hawksail Carrack Bloodwind, crewed by seasoned Valyrian mariners sworn to instruct her, with Sir Barristan as Lord Admiral of the Sea Dragon Squadron in oversight. Bloodwind's maiden patrol traced the coast from the Arba to Cape Wrath. Ports lit torches, children rang bells, and bakers offered loaves shaped as dragons with stately antlers, symbols merging into myth. Daenerys watched gulls circle nets, hauled brimming with silver fish. She recorded each dockmaster's grievance, each captain's complaint of tariffs or piracy. When a Myrish corsair attempted flight after refusing inspection, she ordered sails trimmed, and Bloodwind gave chase through glassy dusk, closing within sling range by dawn. Standing on the quarterdeck, hair whipping silver banners on the wind, Daenerys hailed the corsair, offering parley. The merman launched a smoke pot instead. Archers knocked. Barristan's fist hovered. Daenerys commanded no arrow loosed until a second smoke pot soared. It bore the stag and star painted in pig's blood, mocking her banner. Then Barristan's horn sounded charge. Grapnels bit gunwales, steel rang. Daenerys witnessed swordplay not from stories, but arms reach fury, the stink of tar and panic. She stood fast, sparing enemy wounded where she could, though one crossbow quarrel zipped past her cheek, carving a scar she would carry. When the corsair surrendered, she ordered holds searched. Crates of Taroshi fever roots, now contraband. She impounded the vessel under crown decree, escorted it to Gulltown, and turned confiscated cargo into medicinal salves for New Lazaret. Folk along the coast spoke of the dragon girl's sea justice, half fearsome, half merciful. Word drifted upriver to King's Landing, whispers that Daenerys wore the ocean like scale mail, and carved her own legend independent of any marriage pact. Renly visited her upon Bloodwind's return to port, bearing a velvet pouch with a single-cut amethyst, the size of a robin's egg, his token for an adventurer. Daenerys laughed, slipping the stone onto a leather cord, telling him she preferred wind-tangled hair to gemstone crowns. Renly flushed but smiled, and watchers at dockside felt their realm shift on another subtle hinge, one where affection attracted not by law, but by shared exploits. Not all applauded. In the shadowed alcoves of Casterly Rock, Maester Craelyn presented Tywin with ledgers showing crown debt creeping upward, funding road charters, plague wards, ship refits, farmland redemptions. Generous hands empty coffers, Craelyn warned. Tywin tapped the parchment, thinking of the gold mines whose veins thinned. He dispatched ravens quietly to every iron bank of Bravos outpost, gauging leverage. The Bravosi replied with courteous interest that, if compounded, might one day chain the throne as surely as Valyrian steel. On the 3rd anniversary of the Rhaella Accord, Robert called for a harvest moot at River Run, site symbolic of the Riverland's suffering during rebellion. Camps erupted like colored mushrooms along the Tumblestone River. Jousts boomed, markets buzzed, yet at the moot's heart lay debate on establishing a permanent warden's convocation, an annual congress where each region's warden would present sworn ledgers of well-being, grand stock, troop muster, road status. Peer review by fellow wardens would replace secret muster rolls hoarded for advantage. Ned Stark championed it. Mace Tyrell lauded the transparency. Stannis grudgingly acknowledged merit, though he considered the concept bureaucracy's feast. The only outright resistance came from small clusters of Western bannermen, likely coached by Cersei, citing overreach. Ultimately, the convocation passed by voice vote, and cheers rose beneath banners whipped by autumn wind. That night, as River Run's windows glowed amber against river dark, Viserys vanished. His chamber lay empty, save for a map of the free cities pricked with pins. Barristan found a guard bluffing at dice, who confessed he had seen the prince ride out at dusk, dressed as a hedge knight, Stonehand at his flank. Daenerys learned the news at dawn and flew to Robert, eyes wet with betrayal that felt partly her fault. Robert swore the gates shut, ravens sent, outriders deployed along every road to Lannisport and Gulltown. He paced barefoot across Lord Hoster Tully's solar until the sun climbed over the rope bridge. Counselors feared kidnapping, but handmaids attested Viserys' trunk of personal effects gone of his own packing. Ned argued they let the prince go, bind him no longer if peace was now his to break or honor. Robert raged that a broken oath by royal blood might unravel everything. Days stretched. Scouts returned bearing rumor. A silver-haired youth had booked passage from salt pans on a Bravosi cog, bound east. Stonehand's corpse had been found in a woodsman's shack, throat slit ear to ear, a broken dragon circlet carved into his chest. Barristan bowed his head. Whether Viserys murdered his own protector or bandits did, the trail ended at sea. Robert slammed a gauntleted fist into a stone lintel, cracking masonry. Daenerys stood rigid, grief mixing with anger deeper than words. Ned placed a hand on her shoulder, whispering that some roads men choose lead them beyond reach of love. Winter loomed again, earlier than Maester's forecast, biting crops before final harvest. Refugees of frost drifted south. Robert threw open crown granaries, reducing wine allocations to nobles to stretch barley. Tywin wrote curt warnings about economy of empathy, while Bravosi bankers politely reminded the crown of deferred interest. Yet among cold streets, cookfires burned, children gnawed bread, not stone, and songs persisted, ballads of a stag who taught a dragon to dance with sparks instead of flame, of a princess who rode the sea and lassoed thunder. Then, on a night chilled enough that breath froze on goblet rims, ravens blacker than pitch clawed at the tower of the hand. Their message, the wall had lit all 99 beacon baskets, a summons unheard since the long night. Jean Mormont begged aid. Dead things walked again, cloaked in rhyme, eyes lit like blue frost fires. Robert convened a small council at once, voice echoing across marble like war drums. Stannis argued for immediate levy. Varys wondered if the Night's Watch exaggerated for relevance. Pycelle wheezed doubts about grumpkins and snarks. But Daenerys rose, one palm across the faint scar on her cheek, and spoke of a realm healed only if defended at all edges. She reminded them that the dragons of old had bent knee to no season. They answered winter with fire. Her words cut through cynicism. Robert ordered a vanguard of seasoned northern levies, Vale Knights, and Riverland archers to march within a fortnight, commanded by Eddard Stark as Warden of the North. He pledged gold enough to outfit every man in new lamellar and fur. When the council balked at cost, Daenerys offered to sell the amethyst Renly had gifted her and to pledge 1/10 profit of her coastal shipping venture. Moved, Mace Tyrell matched her donation in Reach grain. Even Oberyn Martell pledged sand silk to line cloaks against coal. In that lantern-lit room, alliances once theoretical galvanized into earth and blood commitments. At the farewell feast before Ned's departure, Robert rose and presented Stark with a blade newly forged. Castle-forged steel ground with rippled etchings shaped like antlers interlacing dragons' wings. He named the sword Vigilance. Ned accepted, eyes shining beneath the great hall's vaults. Daenerys said nothing, but when the king dismissed revels, she slipped into the courtyard where Vigilance waited above Ned's horse gear. She pressed her palm to the hilt's antler pommel and whispered Valyrian words for warding, just as her mother had once traced over cribs to guard sleeping babes. Snowflakes landed on the blade and did not melt. She stepped back, a flutter of unease in her stomach, wonder, perhaps, again rising in the realm, but draped this time in the color of winter's breath. Ned rode at dawn, a gray smear of men and horses winding north across frost-stiff fields. Children waved scraps of cloth, dyed stag and star. Mothers wept. Smiths rang anvils in uneven salute. Some lords muttered that the realm could ill afford both peace and frontier war. But Robert answered them by strapping on his old warhammer and drilling with Stormguard recruits until muscles screamed. He would not send others to hardship he would not himself bear, and soon talk spread that the king might ride north come spring, once supply lines proved sound. Meanwhile, Daenerys took residence in the riverside lazaret. She studied fever patterns, taught healers a Myrish poultice, gleaned from the seized corsair cargo, and wrote treatises on temperature of courage, a metaphor likening social healing to balancing humors of the body. Scholars scoffed, yet found the prose oddly stirring. Extracts found their way into Sep's sermons extolling unity. Cersei, stricken that even poxwords could not tarnish the girl, turned desperation into resolve. She visited Qyburn, a dismissed Citadel scholar rumored to poke at life's shadows, instructing him to find secrets that unmake legend. Qyburn delivered one scrap. Illyrio, he claimed, had introduced the exiled prince to sellsword captains, still loyal to lost dragons, dangling perhaps the eggs of myth. Should Viserys return born upon such flame, the saga of peace would shatter. Cersei smiled thinly. Sometimes, she mused, her own blood might do the work of knives. Across the sea, indeed, Viserys walked marble colonnades of Illyrio's manse, feeling silk shoes, pinch feet, still blistered from flight. Illyrio fed him spiced lamb, flattered him with jests about Westerosi barbarians. He showed Viserys 3 stone eggs, swirled green, cream, black, atop a velvet cushion. Petrified, he sighed. Yet the prince's fingertips tingled heat into cold stone. That night, dreams of wings rumbled inside Viserys' skull. Stags burning, stars shattering, his own reflection crowned not with circlet but living fire. Back in the capital, Daenerys trained daily with Sir Barristan, wouldn't waste her against his blunted tourney blade. She learned footwork drawn from the water dance of Bravos, parries borrowed from Dornish orb swordplay. Bruises blossomed like winter grapes, yet each morning she returned to the yard, hair braided warrior tight. Renly watched from balustrades, torn between pride and wonder. One evening, he brought her a braided leather gorget, adorned with a star inset of stormglass. "In case any blow seeks your throat," he said. She brushed fingers across its polished edges, murmuring thanks that loosened something in his chest. As snows deepened, ravens from the wall told of Ned's arrival and initial engagements. Small skirmishes against pale figures whose blades shattered steel, whose flesh splintered under dragonglass but knit again if flame failed to finish. The courier birds carried tiny vials of pungent sap, veerwood resin melted by fire, said to burn long and bright even on ice. Robert ordered alchemists to reproduce it. Pycelle clucked that wildfire sufficed, but the king would not risk citywide flames again. In the royal solar, by hearth crackling with driftwood brought from Dragonstone, Robert and Daenerys stood facing a map of the north pinned with obsidian shards. He asked her what the dragons of old would do. She replied that even Balerian's fire could not scorch the entire winter. Rather, dragons offered speed, rapid strikes. He asked if she believed dragons might return. She met his gaze and admitted she did not know. Only that wonder, once sparked, seldom snuffed entirely. Robert placed a hand on her shoulder, fatherly weight heavy with trust. "Whether wings or will," he said, "I count on you to keep the kingdom looking upward." Night became a corridor through which news marched relentlessly. A victory near the Weeping Pass, where Ned's men burned a white mound to ash. A setback at Fist of the First Men, where 50 brothers fell. Supplies dwindled, morale frayed. Robert ordered grain from every reach, rerouted north. Knights seconded from each region by lottery to avoid resentment. But resentment still stirred. Lords muttered their levies had fought one rebellion already. Why now freeze for dead men's peace? Cersei championed their fatigue, stoking talk that the wall's threat was a stark fiction to cement northern power. Pamphlets appeared in old town inns depicting direwolves feasting on stag corpses, while starry dragons laughed overhead. Daenerys confronted Cersei at a riot by blessing of the mother's spire. She accused her of incitement. Cersei retorted that the girl's naivety threatened coffers and children alike. Words sharpened until Robert intervened, voice thunderous. He commanded both to stand aside lest pettiness damn souls to ice. Cersei curtsied with venomous grace. Daenerys whispered apology yet left trembling. That night, she climbed the Tower of the Hand's deserted parapet and stared north, imagining Ned's encampment buffeted by moon-ripped blizzards. She wished for wings. As if in answer, a raven arrived from Pentos, sealed in green wax depicting a crowned skull clutched by dragonbone. Cauldra Stormfire's adopted crest, now used by Viserys. The letter addressed Robert but requested audience with "my beloved sister." In curt phrases, Viserys declared he had secured the means to restore our father's throne, but would negotiate a truce, provided Daenerys crossed the narrow sea, unharmed to meet him beneath the mother of mountains on eastern Skagos. A rendezvous remote enough that no spies might swarm. He gave her 90 days. The small council exploded in debate, some calling trick, others begging chance to cage the runaway prince. Robert turned to Daenerys, asking what she wished. She considered the scar on her cheek, the star at her gorget, the memory of Viserys singing lullabies in a plague tent. She asked leave to go, not alone, but with a small escort. Barristan volunteered. Renly insisted as well, citing betrothal rights, though the wedding still awaited her majority. Robert's face contorted between protection and faith in the child he'd come to trust. Ultimately, he granted permission, binding her to a vow that if danger surfaced, she withdraw. 3 ships slipped from Blackwater Bay under new moon. Bloodwind, a Drummond christened Northern Star, and a sleek Pentoshi cog offered by Illyrio, ostensibly courier, but crew suspected spies in service to unknown masters. As the coast fell away, Daenerys leaned over rail, whined salt sharp. Barristan recited tactical drills. Renly, nervous beneath bravado, cracked jokes about krakens courting dragons. Deep in the hold, alchemists stowed casks of vials containing weirwood resin, gifted to test its burn on salt air. They hugged shorelines until rounding the bight, where gales herded them westward. On the 10th night, they sighted Skagos basalt crags, jagged like dragon teeth. Snow still veiled peaks despite calendar summer. Seals barked on ice floes. The mother of mountains rose inland, a dormant volcano rumored once to spout flame, visible from White Harbor. Viserys' letter instructed them to anchor in a cove-like fjord. There, a line of torches snaked upward, marking a path. Daenerys, cloaked in fur, trimmed with sea otter, disembarked with Barristan, Renly, and 6 sworn shields. They ascended slick stone steps carved by giants long dead. Each torch flickered blue rather than yellow. Renly murmured that copper salt sometimes tinted flame. But Barristan's hand never left sword. At the summit caldera, they found Viserys waiting before a ring of braziers. His hair whipped wild, his eyes shimmered fever-bright. Beside him stood Illyrio, fat yet graceful, and 3 cloaked figures in scaled black armor reminiscent of ancient Valyria. Between them, on stone plinths, lay the eggs, green, cream, black, no longer dulled by centuries but glimmering faint internal glow. Heat pulsed across the frozen plateau. Viserys greeted Daenerys, voice equal parts triumph and longing. He spoke of dreams that guided him to Illyrio, of flames that sang names when touched by moonlight. Illyrio extolled prophecy, a prince that was promised, rider of dragons reborn. Daenerys felt power swirl, but also dread. She stepped forward, asking what peace dragons would serve. Viserys replied peace beneath rightful rule. He declared Robert's reign a caretaker interregnum. He offered his sister a queen's crown beside him, if she renounced the stag's tutelage. Renly's sword rasped halfway from scabbard. Barristan raised gauntlet. Daenerys steadied them with a glance. She approached the eggs, palms tingling. Memories flooded. Her mother's breath, Robert's oath, children fed in plague tents, Ned's beacon fires at the wall, a sword called vigilance. She faced Viserys, voice soft as first snow yet cutting. Peace is no cloak to don then discard. It is skin we grow until blood sings its shape. I will not peel it away for crowns. Viserys' rage ignited. He seized the black egg, thrust it toward the central brazier. Flames roared blue, then white. For a heartbeat, silence. Then a fisher spider cracked the shell. A whale, not human, not beast, erupted. Light blazed, blinding. Renly dragged Daenerys back as Barristan leapt, slashing at Illyrio's guards. The plateau rocked, ancient lava tubes groaning. Dude. Snow erupted into steam. That is your Shosuk state. From within fracture, heat birthed form. A lizard shape, wings membrane thin, eyes molten gold. The newborn dragon shrieked, instinct raw. Viserys laughed, exultant madness, yet the creature turned uncertain gaze upon the first moving thing. Him. He extended hand, but blood from fissure sizzled on its newborn hide. Perceiving pain, the dragon reacted. Its throat bloomed orange. Flame roared, engulfing Viserys. His scream sliced the wind, cut short as flesh melted. Daenerys cried out, tears scalding. Barristan shoved her behind. The dragon flapped faltering wings, skittered across stone, trailing embers. Illyria's gods scattered. Chaos consumed summit. Renly swinging. Torchlines toppling. Eggs cracking from shock. Snow turned to boiling slush beneath dragon fire. Daenerys, choking on sulfur, saw the green egg rolling toward cliff. Instinct overruled fear. She lunged, catching it before it plunged. Heat bit her palms, but she held firm. Cracks vined the shell. She crooned words in high Valyrian, half nonsense, half memory. The egg pulsed, then stilled, its fissures sealing in a shimmer of pearlescent green. Plateau's tremors slowed. The black dragon, spent, collapsed, steam rising off scales. Snow resumed its whisper. Illyrio vanished into smoke, his guards either dead or fled. Barristan surveyed ruin, sword red with reflection of coal glow. Vizir's silhouette lay molten glass against basalt, no trace of crown. Daenerys sank to knees, clutching the green egg, tears carving tracks through soot. Renly reached for her but stopped, uncertain of the gulf now between wonder and grief. At dawn, Bloodwind sailed from Skagos, bearing silent survivors. The black dragon confined to hold lined in ironwood, sedated by herbal smoke. Daenerys refused any cabin, choosing to sit beside Crate, hand resting on the egg that no longer throbbed. She whispered lullabies, voice raw. Renly knelt at intervals, offering water, yet she drank little. Barristan drafted reports by lantern. Prince dead, force minimal, dragon alive, potential asset or threat contingent on crown decree. He paused often, eyes distant, perhaps recalling tours in Maker's Reign when dragons last darkened sky. King's Landing greeted their return with thunderstorm fury, waves battering quays. Robert met them in the throne room, jaw set iron. When Daenerys, soot-stained, offered the account, his eyes flooded with sorrow. He embraced her, ignoring dragon stink. He ordered the black dragon kept beneath the dragon pit ruins under watch, commissioned maesters to study it, commanded secrecy until realm could bear such news. He decreed visories given royal crypt burial, though details of his death would cite sickness of spirit. Some lords balked but dared not oppose a king who clutched his hammer, and a grief-stricken girl in the same span. Ned's ravens continued. Good tidings and ill in equal measure. He spoke of a dawn where horn blasts scattered frostwites. He spoke of glimpsing pale giants moving beyond the haunted forest. He urged the king north, dragons or none, for mankind's wall might crack. Robert read these missives in the council chamber, lit by guttering candles, a black dragon hatchling sleeping in ironwood cage below. Daenerys, standing beside him, felt the egg at her hip vibrate faint warmth anew, as though answering the distant call of endless winter. She met Robert's gaze and understood. Their peace, forged on mercy and tempered by sacrifice, had birthed something altogether new. A realm where dragons could fly yet not rule, where stags could bend antlers to shelter, where stars guided ships, not soar. But peace, like dragon skin, needed constant tending lest scales harden into armor and hearts forget why wings first unfurled. Outside, wind howled down from the north, carrying whispers of ancient names. Within the Red Keep, two monarchs of unlikely kinship, one by crown, one by conscience, began charting the next chapter of a song still unfinished. Its chords stretched between furnaces of mercy and furnaces of frost, waiting for voices fearless enough to sing it true. Om Biwa. Snow whispered against the ramparts of Winterfell, sifting through crenellations and pale drifts that swirled like ghostly banners. From the high balcony of the Great Keep, Sansa Stark watched the gray-white hush smother the courtyards, lamps dimming behind frost-veined shutters. The castle had never felt so crowded. Northern levies, Vale knights, and Riverland longbowmen jostled for space in halls that once harbored only direwolves and quiet duty. Yet even packed with thousands, Winterfell felt abandoned, for its lord and half its garrison were still hundreds of leagues north. Beyond the wall, fighting a dawnless war. A raven had arrived but an hour earlier, bearing 2 lines penned in her father's steady hand. Supplies reached Craster's keep. Men hold courage. I hold hope. No more. As if words themselves froze en route, she pressed the note to her chest, wondering whether hope meant survival or simply postponement. Below her, the wordless scraping of shovels cleared ice from the smithy door. Blacksmiths hammered arrowheads by night because daylight no longer guaranteed safety. Candles guttered in the armory. She counted each flicker like a pulse of the keep's tired heart. When Rob entered, snowflakes melting in his auburn hair, he carried fresh worry. Gray wind howls every hour. The direwolves feel something. He rested gloved hands on the stone parapet beside her. Mother's letters speak of dragons hatched and a prince dead. The realm south of the neck shifts while we stand anvil hard, waiting for a hammer we cannot see. Sansa studied his profile, a boy's earnestness buried beneath Lordcast's shadows. Father will come home, she said. Rob's breath clouded. If the wall comes south before he does, no keep will matter. Maester Lewin says the old tales speak of winter that hunted, not merely chilled. He forced a grim smile. We prepare, as he taught us. Yet his eyes slid northward, toward the storm horizon, searching for a banner light could not pierce. Dawn never fully broke that far north. On the fist of the first men, Ned Stark stood beneath a sky, the color of burnt bones, wind sharp enough to slice lip from tooth. Tattered cloaks snapped behind him, the black of the Night's Watch, the green-brown of his own Northmen, the sigils of river trout and mountain falcon alike. They had fought 2 weeks of running skirmishes, retreating stepwise toward the wall's shadow, as the dead pressed with relentless calm. No horns of rally, no drums. Only the brittle clink of ice-rimmed limbs against steel. Across a narrow ravine, fires guttered in hastily dug trenches of pitch and weirwood resin. The substance burned blue-green, licking higher whenever embers kissed snow. Samwell Tarly hunched beside the largest pyre, spectacles fogged, feeding shards of dragonglass into melting permafrost. Gilly knelt nearby, swaddling her babe in layers of crow-black cloth. Sam's cheeks were gaunt, yet his hands were steady as he directed a sworn brother to pour more resin-soaked kindling into the trench. Ned approached, vigilance strapped across back like a dark sliver against wolfskin fur. How many vials remain? 87, Lord Stark, Sam answered, voice hoarse. Less than half of what we began. But the mixture holds flame against the wind twice as long as wildfire. Flame alone won't win this night, Ned said, peering across the ravine. But it keeps fear with the enemy, instead of with us. He clapped Sam's shoulder. You've done more good than Winchester steel. Sam reddened, mumbling thanks. Ned turned to the ridge, where Val men from the mountain clans kept watch with great hafted spears of dragonglass. Farther along, Sir Brynden Tully conferred with Jan Royce over patterns of frost upon the tree line. Ned scanned the horizon for the other's telltale shimmer, praying they would wait until full dark. Fighting them in dusk was slaughter enough. In full night it became a harvest of shadow. He descended the frozen slope to Command Tent, where ravens perched restless on guy ropes. His scribe, a dark-haired northern girl named Willa, darted between stacks of parchment, hands ink-stained and raw from cold. She handed him the latest tally. 24 men sick with frostbite, 11 lost in a brief clash at Hardhome, a dozen crossbow strings snapped from ice. Supplies thin, morale fraying, beasts exhausted. Yet each man still drew his cloak tight and returned to post at shift's change. A horn sounded. One note, distant but rising. Scouts. Ned strode from the tent, snow crunching, as Jon Snow crested the ridge with ghost padding silent beside him. The dire wolf's fur bristled, eyes red in lamplight. They mass in the canyon, Jon said, pushing frost from his beard. At least 50 whites, 2 others on horseback, pale blades reflecting no sun. He swallowed. They are shaping ice into shields, my lord. They mean to cross at dawn, if dawn comes. Ned exhaled mist. We'll meet them where slope narrows, force their numbers into lines we can break. He glanced at John. You carried the report swiftly. Rest. John shook his head. I'll not leave Ghost howling alone. The direwolf bared silent teeth at the darkness, as if scenting the enemy already. Far south in King's Landing, torches flared along the street of silk, while Daenerys paced marble outside the dragon's subterranean chamber. She ought to sleep. Court convened at first light, but rest evaded her since Skagos. The black hatchling, now the size of a mastiff, nested atop an iron brazier, wings too large for its own comprehension, tail thumping stone with each dream twitch. Maester Torn Aaron, sent from the Eyrie to study the beast, snoozed nearby with quills still clutched between ink-blotched fingers. The green egg she'd saved lay warm against her palm. Its shell had darkened to pine hues, shot with glints of jade. Each night she felt it pulse, a heartbeat mirrored in her own chest. She feared what might emerge, a twin to the black, or something gentler. Could dragons be tempered by the love they received, or were they bound to the nature of fire? She crouched before the hatchling. Steam curled from its nostrils. Tiny scales glittered like obsidian chips. She recalled Viserys' laughter. The moment flame consumed him. Regret clawed, though she knew his path had been forged long before Skagos. She whispered Valyrian lullabies. Her mother sang. Dragon's ear frill twitched. Its breathing slowed. She dared not stroke its snout. Barristan warned even a nuzzle could shred flesh. But she rested her hand on the brazier's rim, sharing warmth. Footsteps approached. Renly, swathed in deep green velvet. Lamplight trailing gold along his hair. They call it shadowing now, he said softly. She rose, smoothing tunic. A name suited to fear, not hope. It will be hope that decides how the realm sees him, Renly replied. He nodded at the egg. As it stirred, each night, I do not know whether to wish for hatching. It might turn tide against the dead. Renly's gaze flicked to the hatchling. But I have seen fear kill armies faster than swords. 2 dragons might frighten half the realm out of bravery. Daenerys touched a star-shaped scar on her throat. Fear cuts many ways. She tucked the egg into fur-lined satchel. I sail north tomorrow with the next supply convoy. Renly's eyebrows rose. Robert approved. He tries to forbid me still, but he needs my ships, and men will fight harder knowing their princess stands the line. She tilted her chin. Come with me. Renly exhaled, considering. I sat at council this afternoon. Cersei and Tywin spread talk of rebels in the Westerlands. If the king marches north, they will gut the capital the moment our backs turn. So Rain. She softened. But send Sir Loras with me then. Or Garland. Someone Dornish spears will follow when we traverse their levees. The north deserves banners that shine in darkness. Renly nodded slowly. Garland is prudent. He will sail. He hesitated, then clasped her forearm. Return, Daenerys. We've yet to dance at our own wedding. She met his eyes. Return is safer promised by men than by gods, she said, though her smile warmed him. They parted in the corridor lit by dragon-bone braziers. Renly's steps receded, leaving only the crackle of banked coals and the distant slosh of midnight tide against Blackwater quay. On the morrow, King Robert convened an open audience on the steps before the Red Keep. Snowflakes drifted upon the salty breeze, sign of winter's wings reaching this far south. Fisherfolk, smiths, and scribes clustered around, cheeks ruddy with cold. Robert wore black doublet trimmed with white bear fur, antlered crown glinting dull gold. Beside him stood Daenerys, pallid but resolute, and Barristan, visor tucked beneath arm. Robert raised his voice. The wall calls for aid, and aid we shall give. Grain, steel, men, and hearts. Princess Daenerys will sail north with your sons and daughters, not to rule but to stand. The dead care nothing for thrones. They hunger for life alone, and life we mean to keep. He thrust fists skyward, hammer in grip. The crowd roared approval, a raw cry that startled seagulls and echoed across rooftops. At dusk, the fleet departed, Bloodwind at vanguard, followed by Northern Star and 12 supply cogs, loaded with grain and resin casks. White sails bore the Stag and Star, stitched now with a single black silhouette of dragon wing, signal of hope, not conquest. Wind carried them past Maidenpool, where townsfolk lit shore lanterns, past White Harbor, where Lord Manderley's banners dipped in salute, into the cold throat of the narrow sea, where ice lurked like sleeping sharks. On deck, Daenerys studied charts by lantern. Garland Tyrell paced behind, discussing formation tactics with Captain Orain Waters. Celoras sparred midships with Barristan, practiced blades clacking. Below, the hatchling Shadowwing slept in a reinforced coop, warmed by banked coals, fed sparingly on sheep hearts to curb growth. Each dawn Daenerys tended him, speaking gently until heat behind Onyx eyes dimmed from inferno to ember. 3 weeks into voyage, storm clouds blotted horizon. Whitecaps sheared off hulls, rigging groaned. A raven arrived from Eastwatch. The sea ice had cracked, allowing whites to circumvent the wall by water, overtaking the small fishing hamlets that dotted the bay. Bloodwind's crew stiffened. They were sailing into jaws of enemy unseen, but certainly felt. Night fell purple-black. In the captain's cabin, Daenerys clutched the green egg as thunder shook planks. Fakery of calm abandoned her. She knelt, placed egg upon wolfskin, and whispered. She spoke of summer meadows, of children's laughter, of peace forged from impossible union. Tears slicked shells' rough ridges. Lightning strobed, planks shuddered. Then, faintly, the egg answered. A single vibration, like a heartbeat shared. A crack fizzed in air, neither thunder nor timber. Hair on her arms pricked. She backed away as green veins of light pulsed beneath shell. The egg split, soundless. First fracture, then web. Steam hissed. The smell of cedar and brimstone filled the cabin. The top burst, shards scattered like emerald glass. From within rose a serpentine neck, scales bright as summer leaves after rain, eyes wide and lambent gold. It chirped, soft, questioning. Daenerys exhaled wonder and fear in equal measure. She extended trembling hand. The hatchling sniffed, nuzzled. Warmth flooded her palm, yet no scalding burn. She gathered the creature to her chest, feeling fragile ribs flutter. "Shadowclaw," she murmured, name forming unbidden. Outside, thunderstones crashed. Inside the cabin, a new melody of tiny wings unfurled. At dawn, the storm relented, unveiling a gray coast of broken reefs. Bloodwind edged between ice floes, the fleet trailing like cautious ducklings. North of Eastwatch, water gleamed oily under cloud, corpses bobbing, wildlings and fishers, gray-lipped, eyes rimed blue. On the beach, a dozen shapes wandered, movements jerky. As Bloodwind's keels scraped gravel, archers loosed flaming arrows, igniting whites limb by limb. Garland led marines ashore, axes crackling with resin as they felled any corpse still twitching. Daenerys emerged last, wrapped in sealskin cloak. Jadeclaw nestled beneath her arm. Snow fell in fat, lazy flakes. She inhaled briny rot, heart thudding. Ser Barristan strode beside her, Shadowwing perched upon gauntlet, wings pinned by leather jesses. Villagers peered from behind overturned carts. Girls with frozen braids, elders with fishhook fingers. Their eyes widened to see dragons, yet no screams came. Instead, they bowed, lips trembling prayers. Eastwatch's ramparts bristled with black-cloaked sentries. Tormund Giantsbane greeted them at the gate, beard caked in frost. "Never thought to see lizards this side, Osama," he boomed, eyeing Shadowwing. "Might roast a few dead bastards proper." Daenerys offered curtsy. "If Flame obeys." She stroked Jadeclaw's neck. The hatchling chirped, belching small green spark that fizzed in snow. Tormund guffawed, clapping her back so hard she staggered. Inside, chaos reigned. Wounded-lined hallways, ravens fluttered in rafters, casks empty of pitch. Jon Snow met them in the yard, battered but unbroken, black cloak torn. He caught sight of the dragons, and for a moment childhood tales flickered across his tired eyes. Then he embraced Daenerys like kin, murmuring, "They said you would come. Father will be relieved." Ned arrived soon after, from the north-facing tunnel, armor rimed white. His features thawed at the sight of his daughter's friend, though suspicion lingered on the dragons until Daenerys recounted their temperance. Ned listened, then beckoned her to Council Hall, where crude maps marked nightly retreats toward the shivering forest. Blue dots signified enemy sightings. Too many. "Even with 2 hatchlings, we cannot rely on fire alone," Ned warned. "We need walls of flame, not spark." Daenerys revealed crates of resin brought in fleet holds and proposed fire lanes, trenches filled with resin pitch mixture lining choke points beyond the castle. Archers would carry small vials strapped to arrows to ignite at distance, while dragons strafed where lines broke. Maester Aemon, frail but alert, nodded approval, quoting archmaesters who once described wildfire corridors around Valyrian strongholds. Preparations consumed 3 days. Rangers scouted routes, wildlings felled pines for palisades, Tyrell engineers assembled throwers for ceramic pots of resin. All the while, snow thickened. Sky glowed with aurora pale ribbons, sign that the others stirred. The 4th dawn revealed an army, whites dense as locusts, ice-ridden giants swinging frozen clubs, pale spiders larger than hounds scuttling ahead. And among them rode another astride emaciated elk, crystalline spear glimmering on natural dawnlight. Horn sounded thrice. Death's own herald. Arrows flew, every shaft wrapped in resin cloth. The first volleys sputtered blue flame, dropping corpse ranks like scythed wheat. Yet for each burned, 3 more replaced, frost hissing out embers. Giants smashed palisades, spiders scurried over walls to snap at archers. Daenerys, astride a shaggy Garen, urged Shadowwing into cold sky. The dragon's wings beat uneven, but strong enough for gliding swoops. She clutched saddle ropes, heart thunder. Below, Jadeclaw perched on Jon's armored shoulder, too young to fly but snapping sparks at whites near ladders. Jon fought with Valyrian steel dagger, carving blue-eyed corpses, wolf ghost lunging at ankles. Shadowwing banked, released a cone of black-orange fire across a rank of giants. Resin ignited, giant clubs exploded in shards. Cheers clamored. The other on elk lifted spear, frost coiled from tip. He hurled, spear sliced sky, trailing vapor. Daenerys ducked, yet shard grazed Shadowwing's wing membrane, crystallizing flesh. The dragon screeched, spiraled downward. She tightened grip, whispering soothing commands. Barristan on wall shouted, "Use Jadeclaw," but her mind raced. Jadeclaw too small, still nested on Jon. Shadowwing crashed in snow beyond trenches. Daenerys rolled free, ribs flaring pain. Whites converged. She drew small Valyrian dagger gifted by Ned and stood over dragon, thrashing fury into ice. Sparks sputtered from its maw, melting only air. The other advanced, spear recaptured, white cloak billowing. A yellow-plumed figure barreled through. The Knight of Flowers, Loras, spear level. He struck the other's elk, toppling beast and rider. Yet frost crawled Lora's spear shaft. Seizing, he released. With a hiss, the other rose, unsurprised. Frost blade met steel longsword. Each clash birthed screaming vapor. Daenerys sprinted to Shadowwing, slicing ice from wing with her dagger. Dragon blood hissed. She whispered, "Fly now or never," pressing palm to scaled breast. Heat blossomed. Flames burst from Shadowwing's wounds, evaporating ice. The dragon lurched upright. The other whirled, eyes like sharded moons, raising spear. An arrow seared from ramparts. Garland's bowstring sang. The shaft, resin-dipped, drove into the other's neck. Blue flame erupted. Crystal flesh fissured. Loras sprawled away as the creature shattered into snow dust. Whites hissed, staggering. Shadowwing vaulted skyward, Daenerys clutching ridges. Flames now poured in controlled jets, painting arcs of molten gold. She strafed trenches, relighting them, her shouts lost in roar. On wall, Jade Claw took flight, small wings but fierce spirit, circling Jon's head before dashing toward the battlefield, leaving trails of green-tinged sparks that lit spider silk. Small but lethal bursts set ablaze clusters of corpses. As sunless noon wore on, reinforcements from Castle Black arrived. Mormont's remaining garrison, Free Folk voluntarily forming ranks. Unseen by whites, they flanked through Pine Stand and struck rear lines. Giants fell, spiders scattered. The dead's advance paused, but the wall itself rumbled, an echo rolling miles. From its crest, watchers saw fissures gashed by unknown force. Ice cascaded in plumes, and within revealed a cavernous tunnel bored by dark magic. From that maw, the Night King emerged, taller than any other, cloak spun from darkness of polar night, crown of rime fused to skull. He stepped onto icy field, raising arms. A wave of cold rippled. Trenches faltered. Flames sputtered. Ned, recognizing fulcrum of battle, spurred horse down slope, vigilance shining a dull blue from recent kills. Jon joined, ghost pacing. Behind them thundered a wedge of Northrond knights. Daenerys, circling above, saw lines converging like ancient sigil. Wolf, stag, and star, flower, dragon. She whispered, command. Shadowwing folded wings, plummeting into a dive. Jade Claw followed, chirping war cry lost in rushing air. Ned dismounted, meeting Night King at clearing where resin trench had guttered out. Frost spread from foe's feet, grass snapping to glass. Night King lowered spear, bladed of ice swirling with trapped snow. Ned raised vigilance. Steel met crystal, shockwave through snow to sky. Jon flanked, dagger poised, but unseen whites lunged, forcing duel into chaos. Daenerys timed descent. At final moment, she leapt from saddle, rolling near Ned. Shadowwing skimming low enough to blast blue-white flame across white ring, clearing circle. Heat clashed cold, birthing clouds of steam. Night King turned fractal eyes on her, lips parting in silent snarl. She stood, chest heaving. Jade Claw fluttered to shoulder, green sparks crackling. We choose life, she told the Night King. Declaration more than plea. He raised palm. A gust of ice shards whipped toward her, but Ned stepped between, shield up. Frost exploded around, wood cracked, yet he held. Jon lunged, Valyrian dagger driving for Night King's flank. Ice armor deflected. Still the blade shaved shard from ribs, black fissure spidering out. Night King swung spear. Jon ducked, roll, came up slashing again. Loras, arm bleeding, joined, longsword glowing orange, where resin licked steel. Combined, they kept ancient fiend turning. Daenerys realized dragon fire alone might not stave this horror, but dragon fire tempered by veerwood resin could. She snatched arrow from fallen archer, snapped shaft, tipped it in jade claws, sparked flame until point glowed green, resin igniting. She flung it like dagger, arrow spun, embedding in fissure at Night King's chest. Green fire sizzled ice, crack expanded. Shadowing stooped overhead, unleashing torrent of black-orange flame, precisely where resin flame danced. Two fires merged, incandescent white foundry. Screech like glaciers, calving, ripped sky. Night King convulsed, crown fracturing, body splintering. Light flared, then silence. No body, only cloud of frost motes, swirling, dissipating on wind. Cross battlefield whites staggered, limbs slack. Charnel stench rose as necromantic grip released. Corpses toppled, unmoving. Spiders curled, giants slumped. For a heartbeat, an impossible hush. Then cheers, ragged, incredulous, broke like thawed river. Horns blew triumph notes. Rangers hugged wildling spearmen. Tormund roared laughter enough for 10 men. Snow still fell, yet flakes melted before touching Daenerys' shoulders, warmed by dragon's residual heat. Ned clasped her forearm. The realm owes you. She shook head. It owes every soul who chose mercy over revenge. Jon approached, eyes on Jadeclaw. They will sing of 2 dragons who saved the North. Then they must sing of wolves and flowers, of crows and free folk, or the song is half true. She smiled at him and turned to survey the smoldering field. In days following, ravens raced to every corner. Night King shattered, dead dispersed, wall damaged but standing. Supplies poured north, blankets, seed grain, masons. Robert himself marched through Wintertown weeks later, beard flecked gray, hugging Ned amid tears no frost could hide. He knelt before Shadowing and Jadeclaw, perched on ramparts, laughter booming, calling them. Peace, once fragile, had been tempered in far colder forge. In King's Landing, Cersei's whisper campaigns died under weight of jubilation. Even Tywin paused, gauging new reality where dragons and wolves ally. He reopened mines to crown a say, salvaging stature through gold rather than coups. Within the year, a grand convocation convened at Harrenhal to draft the Pact of Dawn, a charter pledging annual levies to the Night's Watch, rotational stewardship of wall maintenance, and prohibition of necromantic sorcery. Lords affixed seals, a direwolf etched with star, a crowned stag, a winged dragon, a golden rose, a sun and spear, and even Tywin's lion. Songsmiths dubbed it the Banner of Many. When Daenerys pressed wax with the stag star dragon sigil, cheers shook charred towers once cursed. Shadowing and Jadeclaw matured, yet Daenerys forbade breeding more, until realm could absorb wonder without fear. Instead, she and Barristan trained them to haul supply barges over mountain passes, to ignite beacon bonfires signaling harvest festivals, to patrol coasts deterring slavers. Dragons had not vanished nor conquered. They served. Years later, on Midsummer Eve, Robert decreed a new holiday, Mercy's Dawn. Bells tolled across Westeros, from Sunspear to White Harbor. At Storm's End, children released lanterns shaped like antlered stars. At Dragonstone, scholars demonstrated lens-forged mirrors reflecting sunlight into luminous sigils, visible leagues at sea. Homage to Jadeclaw's green fire. On that first Mercy's Dawn, Daenerys, Renly, now her husband, and their infant son, Aeron, stood atop Storm's End parapet with Robert and Ned. They watched lantern constellations drift upward, mirrored in calm black water far below. Robert raised goblet. Once I looked at sky and saw only sunrise hollow. Now I see stories of hearts that beat despite frozen night. He turned to Daenerys. You gave them that. She touched the scar on her cheek, now faint silver. The realm gave itself, I merely listened. Ghost padded by, muzzle graying, still sentinel. Jada claws swooped overhead, smaller children pointing. Shadow wings circled higher, silhouette cut in copper dust. The winds carried laughter, songs, the crackle of feast fires. No single crown shone brighter than those flames, because now the realm understood. Crowns are but metal, while flame is life share. Below, waves whispered against cliff, like a lullaby repeating the same refrain. Mercy is strong as steel, and as torches of mercy's dawn rose shimmering upon sea air, none there doubted that refrain would carry on, sung by free folk and lords alike, long after the dragon's wings at last folded into legend and the snow that once threatened all had melted into spring.